Welcome to episode 74 of On My Studio Table. Behind me I have hanging a skirt which has just been ordered from my online shop. It is part of a collection that I made called Torn. This was presented in a wearable art event called Remade, and I made a video to go on the big screen behind the presentation that I made of this collection, and I will play that in a moment. But I just wanted to let you know that this was inspired partly by my husband's ancestry and partly by my concerns about poverty and the way that it's often a hidden issue. Some of us have been through hard times financially and we know what it's like, but mostly we haven't had to go hungry or sleep outside. And there are plenty of people that do have to do this. And I was thinking about how quite often the people in my husband's ancestry who were sent here as convicts were in a situation where the poverty was so extreme that you can understand why they might have been tempted to do something like stealing, because then they had something to sell that they could use to feed themselves and their families. And this was a very common situation. The other issue is that young women in particular, who had no work, no home, and so on, would steal to sell things so that they didn't have to go into prostitution. So it was almost like they risked being transported and even being hung above having to go on the street as a prostitute. So this gives you a much bigger understanding of the issues behind the convict system. There were a lot of convicts sent to Tasmania, and there's a lot of history written down about them, including descriptions of the people that were sent. So in the days before photography, it was a very helpful way for us to visualise people that we are researching. It also, of course, was used so that if anybody absconded, they could be found. So I was thinking about how, clothes were patched and mended until they were nearly falling to pieces. And I called this collection Torn in reference to that. Many of these people, 70% at least, made lives for themselves after transportation. And I've mentioned before that they started businesses, had families, and so on. And quite often the families actually don't know about their convict heritage because it was seen as a stigma and people didn't talk about it. Now we understand a bit more about how it all happened and the situations that people were in. For one example, one couple who lived in London were only able to afford one room with their 4 children in a slum area, even though both of them were working. So you can just imagine what the situation was like for them. So I'll just play you the little video that I made, which is about the Torn collection. And you can find this at gonerustic.com with the thumbnail called Torn. Many of the items in the collection have sold. I don't have many left now, but if you would like to have a look, I have left photos up of the things that I've made. things that I haven't mentioned in the last few months is that Ian has been unwell. He had what we think was influenza A in July. He didn't get very sick. He shook it off in a few days. But over the months since, he has been in a lot of pain. And the diagnosis seems to be that the side effect of influenza A that he has experienced and is still experiencing is an inflammation of the muscles. This has not only caused him a lot of pain, but it also has caused his muscle tone to decrease. It's only supposed to last about 100 days. It's actually been longer than that. He is improving, but it is very, very slow. So if you would like to say something encouraging to Ian in the comments, that would be wonderful, and I will pass them on to him. He has so much that he wants to do, and he's still doing his ship models that he does while he's spending time at the private museum that he runs, and he does what he can. One of the lovely things that has happened is that we've been able to resume our walks in the late afternoon or the evening. We would try to do this at least 5 times a week, but for some months we haven't done that. That's partly because the weather's been a bit unfriendly for going for walks, but we've had some much more settled weather. So I'm happy to say that we have been able to start going on walks together. And some of the photos that I'm sharing with you today are from our walks yesterday and today. I hope you enjoy the different scenes that I'm showing you. Because of spring, some wildflowers are blooming also, and I'll put the names on the screen with the photos that I've taken. We did notice also a beautiful aroma when we went out the night before last, and that is from the native currant, which is just coming into flower. Very, very tiny flower. The bush is a spiky green, similar to the top that I'm wearing, and the flowers are a greenish white, but they are so beautiful and they have the most beautiful aroma. So I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm sharing a big update on the Red for Courage project and also an update on the Coverlet of Comfort. While I'm on that subject, I forgot to include a clip last time, so I do apologise. I said it was coming up in a moment and it never came. I don't know if you noticed, but I did put an apology in the description underneath the video. So I will share that today, plus an update on what I've done since then. Over this past week, I have finished all the fly stitch around the squares and cut out my circles and inserted some vintage embroidery of wattle blossoms. And then the circles that I cut out to make the holes, I appliqued onto some of the other squares. I used the same fly stitch idea around the applique circles, but around the cutout circles, I did as Kathryn suggested in this year-long project, to do an overcast stitch, I think it's called. It was quite difficult to stitch because there were quite a few layers and the embroidery is quite dense, so I had to make sure I had a sharp needle, but I got it all done and I'm really, really happy with how it looks. As I said in the last video, I'm showing you this sideways. It actually will be vertical around this other way when it gets joined onto the coverlet. The other thing that I wanted to do, which I mentioned last time, was to add this as an extra layer. And the idea was to do some of the squares, just cover some of the squares with a semi-transparent or a transparent layer. I'm going to drape it down, not quite sure how yet, but something like this. But I haven't stitched it down yet because there's another stage to do. I watched the video this morning and there's some stitching to do either in between the squares, or my thinking is maybe diagonally across the squares, partly because this is about fragments of time or fragments of memory. And sometimes life goes in very strange directions and very unexpected directions. And that's why I'm thinking diagonal. The example Kathryn is working on is beautiful and she's done it in a grid. And I do love grids. And we sort of have that because of the mosaic pieces or the fragments. But I'm thinking to do diagonal, fairly random lines, and maybe vary the stitch a bit. That's been recommended. But I'll work on that this week and I'll have a think about it and see what I think looks right for my piece. After that, I will then drape this over the top and attach it down, probably with invisible base to start with, and then maybe some seed stitch here and there. I'll just see what happens. I love working intuitively because to me, that means there's no pressure. I can let this speak to me as I work along and not stress too much about what's going to happen at the next stage. I find that while I'm stitching, the next stage generally becomes clear to me, and if it isn't, I leave it for a few days and then come back to it. And it's quite a relaxed way to work, and that's how I like to do it. I'm finally on the homeward stretch of the October section for the Coverlet of Comfort with Kathryn Chambers of K3 Cloth Tales. This has been such a wonderful project, as I keep saying. And the lovely thing about it is that we all have room to move within the prompts and ideas that Kathryn shares with us for each month. Every week she puts out a video and then we follow the prompts as we see fit. The last stage of this was to put some lines with a whipped running stitch and then to thread another stitch through it. And that was to be outlining the grid of all the squares that we'd embroidered down. I decided not to do the grid. I decided to do diagonal lines. I have used that quite a lot, particularly in some of my grounded artworks that I've made with my own paints made from the earth. And I find that it's a really great way to add a dynamic element to a piece of artwork in a very simple manner. I decided to do mine when I did the running stitch with a burgundy pearl cotton, and then when I threaded or whipped the running stitch, I used this soft grey embroidery floss, just 3 strands of it. To thread through, you had to do another thread winding through what you'd already done. I've decided not to do that, mainly because I really like how this looks. So the burgundy and the grey, I think, are enough on this piece. The other thing which I mentioned before is there was an idea of adding some veiling or some kind of transparent or semi-transparent fabric over some of the squares. And I decided to drape one piece over it. And I really like the effect of the tea-dyed colour. It's not too strong. It's enough to make it a little bit hard to see through, but you can still see some of the details through it. When I put it on, I wanted to deliberately leave some folds. So I invisibly basted the whole thing around the edge so that it would stay in place. And then, because the folds were soft rather than flat, I actually turned the whole thing over. So this is the back. And I ironed it from the back. And the heat from the iron coming through has actually made the folds flatten down and make creases. And now what I'm doing is I'm doing some stitching along some of the fold lines. I had thought that I was going to do seed stitch. That was my plan. And I started doing it with this beautiful linen thread that Lisbeth Dane gave me. Lisbeth Dane also has a channel, as you know, if you've been following my videos. And she sent this with her square for the Red for Courage project. And I really wanted to use it because it's beautiful thread, but it just didn't look right on this project. So I'm saving that for something in the future. Instead, what I did was I used this cream pearl cotton, which I have a lot of and I've used often in my projects, as you would know. And that seemed to be the right colour for this. Seed stitch went out the window, and I've been doing cross stitch and running stitch and a few French knots here and there. And I'm happy now with how it looks, and I'll continue to do the whole thing in the same way. So as I come down and continue from where I've already stitched up here, I'll continue that right down to the bottom. What I like about this is, as I said, you can still see the squares. This symbolises the fact that we have memories of things, but sometimes they're a bit hazy because they might have been a long time ago, or we just have difficulty remembering some details. That will be it once I've done this with the cream coloured cotton, and then I'll be able to start on the November section. And I've partially watched Kathryn's video for the first week of November, and it looks really, really interesting. So more next week. The Red for Courage project, to celebrate being given the all clear after 5 years since my first cancer diagnosis, has just grown and grown, and it's been so wonderful. I've been very moved and humbled by everybody's participation in this. The last count is that there are now 240 squares. As you can see, the scroll is getting very fat. There are 118 squares stitched down in the scroll so far, but I've gone on to do 6 more sections, which I've laid out on the table. And what I've also been doing is starting to add some embroidery in between the squares. So the squares are all invisibly basted because I didn't want anything to intrude on the beautiful work that you have done. And I've been using the fabrics that you've been sending me with your squares to do the flowers and the leaves. So that's been a real joy to do. Some of the fabrics were eco-dyed or eco-printed, as for these leaves, and many of the leaves feature that. And then the others feature printed fabrics that were sent to me that I've cut into leaf shapes and mainly circles, but I also did what is called fussy cutting, which means you cut out a printed flower or other printed image, and then you use that to inspire the stitching. And I've really enjoyed that. This flower is a eucalyptus flower on a lovely fabric that was sent, and I fussy cut the eucalyptus flower. I also did the same with some of the leaves. I'll show you here. The leaves on this flower, I fussy cut from some of the fern shapes on the same piece of fabric. Then we have a circle cut from another fabric that was sent. So it's not only the squares that represent you and your generosity in participating, but it's the fabrics that I'm using for the applique as well. So I'll just make my way around the table. This flower has some of the naturally dyed fabrics for leaves and some printed fabric for the flower itself. More naturally dyed fabric. And I tried to use colours of embroidery thread which complemented the squares near it. The soft grey of my naturally dyed and printed fabric really seems to set off the squares, and so I could afford to add a splash of colour with some of the threads that I used. There's another flower. That one features a pistol stitch. This was actually the first panel that I did of these 6 panels. There's another eucalyptus flower and some more naturally dyed. No, that one's not naturally dyed. That was fussy cut from another piece of fabric that had some leaves printed on it with red veins, which I really, really liked. So it was fun experimenting with different stitches to do the embroidery. There's some more pistol stitch. And then I still need to embroider these leaves here, which are naturally dyed fabrics. And this is a circle cut out from another one of the fabrics. And I did some straight stitches and some French knots on that one. And as I come back round, that's what's been the fun thing about this, is experimenting with different stitches. This one, this flower, which is basically a circle, features some feather stitch. So I'll probably do more like that. The other leaves I've alternated mainly between a fly stitch, a continuous fly stitch, and over here a combination of back stitch and elongated chain stitch. So it's really starting to come together. The next thing that I will do is to join these 6 pieces. I won't join the 6 pieces once they're together onto the scroll just yet. I think it's already fairly cumbersome, and I do need to add embroidery in between the squares on this whole scroll section. So I hope you like what I'm doing. I have been sharing this on Facebook and Instagram, and mostly the people that have seen it seem to really like it. So thank you so much again. It's a joy to work on this project, and I don't mind that it's taking a long time. I just think about you and what you've said and what you've sent while I do it, and it just makes me feel so warm and happy. Thank you. I mentioned to you that 2 more squares have come in, bringing the number up to 240 that have come in total from all around the world. These 2 are more local. This one came from one of the girls in my stitching group, Susie, who lives on the east coast of Tasmania, and she's done some wonderfully textural fabrics. This one has a raised pattern on it, and this is wool, and then we've got this loose weave as a base fabric for it. And all she's done really is stitched it together and added some French knots, and I don't feel that it needs any more. I just love the simplicity of the design and the way the fabric really shines in this arrangement. The other one that has arrived is from Kate, who also lives on the east coast of Tasmania. We've known Kate for many years, since when we were first married actually, and she made this beautiful embroidered phoenix. And if you know the story of the phoenix was reborn out of the fire. Normally we think of fire as destructive, but in this case, the symbolism is that after the fire, you are reborn. So this can happen after any difficult experience. For me, it was being diagnosed with a rare and aggressive cancer and then going through treatment afterwards. But the wonderful thing is that I've come out the other end and feel very well. I'm not a young woman anymore, so there are certain issues to do with getting older, but I feel well. And I'm so grateful for this, and it's like I've been reborn. So this is a beautiful symbol to include in the scroll. Even though it's bigger than what I've asked for, I'm going to use it in a certain way on the finished scroll, and you'll find out when the time comes. I've got a few ideas about what I'm going to do to feature this beautiful embroidery. So thank you very much, Susie and Kate, for these lovely contributions to the Red for Courage project. Here is the box of squares that I still need to attach to the scroll. As you can see, there are still a lot left to do. 240 squares, 118 stitched down on the main scroll section, and then 6 more sections done, with a total of 21 plus 28, which is 49. So a lot has been done, way more than half now, but still a lot to do. And I'm so looking forward to incorporating these into the scroll as well. For the applique, I've been using some of the fabrics that you've so kindly sent to me when you sent your squares. Some of them I'm going to keep for other projects, but these I'm going to try to incorporate into the embroidery that I'm doing in between the squares. So I have already used these pieces. These are the leftovers from cutting out the circles and the leaves, and I backed them with a fusible web, a paper-backed fusible web. There are different brands. The one I use the most is called Vlisifix, and you use your iron to fuse this on, and then once you've drawn your shape on the back and cut it out, you peel the paper off, and then you flip it over and iron it onto the background. So I've prepared a few already. This one already has the fusible backing, and I will draw the shapes on the back, but I might also fussy cut some of these flowers and incorporate them as they are with embroidery embellishment. This is the one with the eucalyptus flowers that I mentioned, and I've been using these as flowers, but I've also been using some of the ones that are only partially there to do leaves. And I just draw the shapes on the back if I need to, otherwise I just cut around what's already there. This one I haven't cut up yet. It's a beautiful bouquet of flowers. So I'm going to try and find a way to use that as it is and maybe cut loosely around it and fuse and embroider that. These I haven't backed with any fusible web yet. This is another one with Australian wildflowers, and as you saw, I have used some of the daisies or flannel flowers. I'm not sure which they are. And I've cut out some of the gum blossoms as well, the eucalyptus blossoms, to use. And we also have Banksia here, which I haven't done yet, 2 different sorts. Actually, that one could be Callistemon, and this one's the Banksia. Then we have the yellow wattle flowers, which I've also cut out ready to use. So a really great fabric to use either as it is or cutting out the different design elements on it. This is a lovely paisley fabric, and I'm thinking about maybe using the shapes as they are. So that one is a kind of a heart shape, that's a kind of a leaf shape, and so on. So I'm still thinking about that one. This stripy one I think would be great for leaves, especially if I lay them lengthways. So that's another idea that I have, and that's some more of this fabric. So beautiful fabrics to use, and they just seem to go with all the colours that you've used on your squares. So I really, really love using these. I probably won't use them all up, but they definitely won't go to waste. They are just so lovely. I have little bags here too, in which I've placed the ones that I've already prepared. So here we have some leaves, combination of naturally dyed fabrics, which were sent in one envelope with the square in little rectangles, which are just lovely, and I've used them all up, and other leaves out of other fabrics. Some more eucalyptus flowers that I'm going to use, and some other circles and flower shapes that I'm going to use too, from the Australian wildflowers one, and this comes from another piece of fabric which I don't think I have any left of. I think I've used most of it up. Oh, I've got a little bit here. This one, I cut some leaves off this one. Some of them were like a maple leaf, and some of the buds and flowers I also cut out to use. So much fun, and thank you, thank you, thank you. In my last video, I mentioned that I'd been asked if I was going to do a flip through of my 2 art journals. This one is called Wetlands and the other one is called Woodlands, and they're a series. So I have done it. I've made the flip throughs for both of the books. The first one is going to air at 8 p.m. on November the 8th, and it will be for my supporters only. So if you're a VIP or a Ko-fi support member, you'll be able to access the video of the flip through of this journal. I know I have shared different pages over the weeks and months that I've been working on these journals, but it's nice to have something cohesive where you can see everything in one go. And there's no talking. All I've done is put some very pleasant music and slowly flip through the book so that you can see what I've done. I hope you enjoy it. I don't want to force anybody, of course, to become a supporter. You already support me by watching this video and the other videos that I've made. But it's just an extra level, I guess, of support, either through Ko-fi or through the VIP group on my Gone Rustic shop page. I'll share links in the description so that if you do want to join and have access to special videos and so on that I give to my group, then you can sign up for however short or long a period you would like. There are a few options in both cases. So thank you in anticipation. Because I've concentrated so hard on the Red for Courage and the Coverlet projects, I have done nothing for the Circle project with Elizabeth Dane or any more to my scroll. The scroll is not far off being finished, and I was hoping to have it ready for you today, but unfortunately no. There are so many hours in a day, and it's funny, when you start stitching on something, you end up in a zone or on a roll, however you'd like to explain that, and you don't want to stop. And it's better to go with that flow while it's there, because it means that you're feeling inspired and you'll have plenty of ideas flowing as you stitch for whatever you're going to do. So that's what I've done, and I know that when I pick these up again, the same thing will happen. The ideas for colours and composition and stitching will flow, and I'll enjoy them just as much.